On December 13, 2012, the 376th birthday of the National Guard was celebrated by Americans. It is the oldest component of the armed forces of the United States. This subject has been touched on lightly throughout history and could almost be overlooked by the active component. The National Guard was established from a direct declaration on December 13, 1636. This is when the Massachusetts General Court in Salem, for the first time in history of the North American continent, established that all able-bodied men between the ages of 16 and 60 were required to join the militia. This is when the term citizen soldier was coined. The declaration stated that citizen soldiers who mustered for military training could be and would be called upon to fight when needed. The militia drilled once a week and would often go on guard detail each evening and would warn in case of an imminent threat. The original colonial militias protected their fellow citizens from foreign invaders, Indian attacks, and to help win the Revolutionary War. Once the colonies gained independence, Congress stilled armies and disciplined the militia, but the training and appointments were done by the states. During the War of 1812, and despite the political isolation from Europe, the United States realized that there was still a need to maintain military forces. The militia was filled almost entirely by volunteers, and the state began to rely completely on their volunteer units, and they would spend their federal funds entirely on them. The South even had a militia, however, immigrants typically filled theirs. The immigrants began to join in 1840s and 1850s. During this time, ethnic units such as the Irish Jasper Greens and the German Stubenguards began to spring up. During the Mexican War, the militia units made up 70% of the U.S. Army. The two components did not mesh well together at first. The regular Army officers were upset when militia officers outranked them. The regulars were also annoyed that the volunteer troops were sloppy and poorly disciplined. During the Mexican War, after several key battles were won, the complaints slowly declined. The pattern for working with the regular army and the volunteer militias was then set during this time, and would be used for another 100 years. The regular officers provided military know-how and leadership, and the citizen soldiers provided the bulk of the fighting force. The militia was used during the Civil War, and when it ended, the South was under military occupation. During the Reconstruction of the South, the state's right to organize its militia was suspended. During this time, many African Americans joined the militia. When the Reconstruction ended in 1877, only 9 states kept African American militia units. The late 19th century was a period of growth for the militia. In many of the larger states, elaborate armories were constructed to house militia units. It was then during this time that the states began to rename their militia the National Guard, named in honor of Marquis de Lafayette, who commanded the Garde Nationale and was a hero during the American Revolution. In 1903, the National Guard began to become modernized. The Militia Act in 1903 provided increased federal funding and federal control over the National Guard. The states still had control of a portion of their units, and in order to obtain federal funding, they had to reach a minimum strength and had to be inspected by the regular Army officers. The Militia Act also required the Guardsmen to attend 24 drills per year and attend 5 days of annual training. This act moved the militias, or National Guard units, from a strictly volunteer force to a paid force. The Guardsmen, however, for the first time were paid, but only for their annual training days. The National Defense Act of 1916 guaranteed the state's militia status as the Army's primary reserve force and required that each state rename their militia the National Guard. This act required National Guard officers to have pre-qualifications and allow them to attend U.S. Army schools and gain additional training. The act also required that each National Guard would be inspected and recognized by the War Department. The National Guard units were ordered to be organized just like the regular Army units were. The act also stated that Guardsmen would be paid not only for the annual training days, but for their drill days as well. During World War I, the National Guard made up 40% of the combat strength of the U.S. forces. In fact, 3 of the first 5 U.S. Army divisions that entered combat in World War I were from the National Guard. The National Guardsmen from the Carolinas and Tennessee formed the 30th Division and received the highest number of World War I Medal of Honors. After World War I, observation units of the National Guard were formed. During the Depression, additional units were halted. However, at the end of World War II, the Air Force was formed and with the addition to the air component for the National Guard, also known as the Air National Guard. Starting in the 1960s, the National Guard units began seeing more action back home than when they did overseas. The Guard is also a state's militia, so they can be called upon for the natural disasters or even for riot control. During the late 1960s, the Guard had riot control duties for the anti-war demonstrations. The 60s began a period of social change, not only for the nation as a whole, but for the National Guard as well. African Americans were allowed to join the National Guard in 1965 for all states. The only women in the Army were nurses, and in the 1970s, the armed services began expanding opportunities for women. The Guard began doing not on federal missions, but state missions as well. In 2005, more than 50,000 troops were called upon to support the Gulf states after Hurricane Katrina. After September 2011, more than 50,000 Guardsmen were called upon to serve the national security and combat terrorism. Since the start of war on terrorism, there has been over 500,000 National Guard troops deployed and currently are serving overseas. From the humble beginnings of 1636 to the modern National Guard we know today, the citizens who have served have done so without hesitation to protect not only their community, but their country as well. As the National Guard's motto states, that they will always be ready and they will always be there. For more information about the National Guard, you can visit the following resources and contact your state's own headquarters as well.